small plate, and like half of that would be the meat, and then a little bit of potato and a little bit of some other vegetable. And then I would just drink a lot of water. And dessert, the one thing I turned down every time, because I knew that I was early in this, and I'm not saying that there's not a time for celebration. I mean, I celebrate a lot with sweet stuff to this day, not very often, but I definitely enjoy it when I do. But, you know, at that time, like, I knew that I was too early in it to really be cheating. I find it really funny, you know, I used to do this a lot. I used to go on these diets, and, you know, you're doing the diet for like 2 weeks, and you're like, I'm gonna have a cheat day. And, you know, you've hardly really gotten your feet wet in developing any sort of a new lifestyle. And of course, like, it throws you off in a horrible way. So I really was determined to not do that this time. And so I didn't. I was really strict to this the whole time. Everybody thought I was crazy. They were like, well, girl, you gotta have something. And it's like, I did. I ate just enough. I don't need, you know, I don't need this cookie. It looks really good, and, you know, I don't need all these things. What I noticed when I was around the Bay was just the eating pattern during the holidays, and it kind of grossed me out, I'll be honest with you. Like, the food is one thing, and I knew, like, it took me an extra year to learn about the timing of eating, and once again, another topic, we'll get into it on another episode, but, like, you know, the routine was like, okay, so you have breakfast, and then you go out and you do a few things, whatever, and you might stop somewhere, and there might be a snack here and there that you put in your mouth, whatever. You come home, you have lunch. You know, you have to keep your snack small because you don't want to spoil your lunch. And so then you have lunch, and then somebody comes over, so you're gonna put out chips and everything like that. So yeah, you eat a couple, whatever. And, you know, but not enough that you spoil your supper. So then you have the big supper. You have, like, because you have endless turkey leftovers for, what is it about turkey that, like, all Christmas, whenever you're, like, around the Bay, like, everybody has, like, endless turkey all, like, all holiday long. So yeah, like, you eat all of that, and definitely not, like, you know, being too mindful of those, like, of the potatoes and gravy. And that's another thing I wasn't eating at the time, was gravy. Which I, for other reasons, can't eat anymore. But, yeah, and then you have, like, what, like a big slice of cake and a couple cookies? At least then, in my family, that's how it was done. I'm sure, especially, you know, anyone listening from around the Bay has probably had a very similar scenario with their own family. And then we would go out visiting. And what happens every time when you're around the Bay and you go visiting? They just finished supper, and they're like, take up a plate of supper. And 9 times out of 10, my family, and I'm sure I have done this a million times when I was younger myself, you go, okay, and you pick up a plate of dinner, even though you just ate dinner and dessert. And so you eat another meal, and then you eat another dessert, and then there's still cookies out on the table, and you're eating that. And so then when we would go home at like 9 o'clock, put on a movie, the first thing my family would do, put on the popcorn. And so you're eating this popcorn until like 10:30 p.m. and then by that time you have what, like a half hour before bed? So this is literally round the clock eating, and I became so conscious of this eating all day thing. I knew nothing about, like, you know, eating windows or anything like that at this point, but I felt that it was wrong to eat that consistently and to eat that late. I started noticing that, like, the times that I did eat a little bit at night, it just didn't feel good, and I didn't sleep as well. So I go home after this Christmas break, and I hop on the scale, and I find out that I had lost 15 pounds in the month of December. I remember that because it was so monumental, and I just couldn't believe it. I could not believe that these slight changes, because I really didn't feel like I was doing anything that dramatic. I felt like what I was doing was common sense that I should have been doing before. And I didn't find it too hard to stick to because I was feeling good, feeling really good, and in a way that I had never felt before. So I just felt, why would I deviate from this now? So at this point, I'm just pumped. I know that there's good to come out of this, and I knew I was afraid of veggies, so I started buying spinach and field greens. And what I would do is I would make these green smoothies. I had a doctor tell me later to, you know, add Greek yogurt to it so that I could put some, like, fat and protein into it, and that I'm not just having sugar from the fruit. You know, and I would make chicken wraps. I could not cook to save my life, so it was just chicken wraps with spinach and field greens, and then like a a smoothie with spinach and berries and yogurt and maybe a few chia seeds. And that's what I was doing at the time, and weight continued to come off. But right after Christmas, that job contract that kind of helped me figure out where I was going on the wrong path, that job actually ended. And I knew that unemployment was coming, and I knew there weren't a lot of jobs out there. I've been kind of hit or miss. I had a few eggs in the basket, but nothing full-time was really in sight. And so the day after my job ended, I had the foresight. I went right to the YMCA, I signed up for a membership, and I made another promise to myself, which was to go 3 times a week. Which, once again, if you're just starting to go to the gym and you have like a crazy life and everything, not recommending that at all. But I had a lot of time on my hands, and my father's health was worsening, and I had a lot of things on my mind, like my future and my family and what to do with my life. I could not sit at home playing video games all day. At this point in my life, I would just go crazy. I had so many bad coping mechanisms before this, and honestly, at this point, I knew I didn't want to return to them because I felt the consequences could be lethal. So, at this point, I knew that I had to focus. And I started going to the gym a lot. I started walking on the treadmill, doing incline, and I knew I couldn't run. I didn't try that for a very long time. I would do elliptical sometimes. I hated cardio, but I would force myself to do it. But what I really liked, and I still love to this day, is lifting weights. It was really light weights at first. I was just, doing some 10-pound curls here and there and doing the lightest weights on all the weight machines. But I started doing that, and I started kind of figuring out what works for me. And realizing, just going back to this memory of being a kid and being like, I want to have boy muscles one day. Not to, gender the idea of muscles. I would never do that. But, as a kid, I was a tomboy, and I wanted to be more masculine. And that's a thing that I've embraced as I've gotten older. But, when I started noticing the slight muscle gain, and I started noticing that I could walk a decent distance, it just pushed me to keep on going. And at this point, I could make a few dishes, and I was a bit better at making these smoothies, and I didn't need to just put spinach in. I would have spinach in a sandwich, or, I wasn't just hiding it in things as much. I was trying new vegetables here and there. I was becoming very aware of carbs, and, I was still calorie counting, which I did stop doing at some point, but I was still calorie counting, and, once again, trying to make sure I was only eating, what I needed, and a couple times a day. I was a bit extreme when I first started. I went to a doctor, I told the doctor everything, and she was like, you need to slow down, and I did. I listened to her advice, but what she did give me was a diabetic meal plan. And I didn't follow it super strictly, but I became a lot more aware of, what kind of carbs are good, what kind of carbs not so good. Just learning a bit about insulin, not, what I know now. But, at this point, things just kind of keep on building. And I eventually do get another job, 6 months later with Eastern Health, and I'm doing that over the summer. And, once again, I, at this point, weighed about 190 pounds when I got the job, so I had lost a tremendous amount of weight from 67, so, it's 67, it's I had lost a lot of weight, to put it that way, a lot of weight. And I remember getting my picture taken and looking at my ID and feeling really great about how I looked in a picture for once that I didn't take. But shortly after I started that job, my father went into palliative care. He was there for 7 weeks, actually. It was hard, and, I am really grateful that he got to see me lose the first, huge amount of that weight. Definitely not all of it, but he got to see a lot of it come off, and, as I said, I've struggled with mental health, with mental illness my whole life, and he was always so worried about me, and I think that when the time came and he passed, and he said to me that he felt confident that he didn't have to worry about me anymore. And, how can you go back on a promise that you made to yourself when you hear something like that from someone you love right before you lose them? And so, for me, I probably, I think that my weight stayed the same, or I gained a pound, in the next 2 weeks from funeral and all that stuff and all the food. But, I mean, I couldn't really eat a whole lot of really bad stuff anyways because of a medical condition. And so, yeah, my weight did go back to its normal losing after that. And, you know, it was painful to lose him, but it pushed me. And then by the time that November came, well, the time that October came, really, it was my first birthday without my dad, and I was depressed, and I don't know what happened. My dad was a runner all his life. It just came to me, just go for a run. And at this point, I was 165, and I figured maybe my knees can handle it now. I went for a run for about 6 minutes. I felt like I was going to die. I was so out of breath, and, you know, I remember messaging a friend. I was like, how do you do this and think it's fun? My lungs are burning, but I kept doing it. And, you know, I traveled a bit, you know, throughout North America, just, you know, for a couple weeks after that, just United States stuff. And when, you know, when I was there, I was running every other day, and I was walking on those other days. And I came home, and I pushed myself, and I kept running. And at this point, a little bit before that, I had this awakening of, like, I want to go back to school. I don't want to do IT anymore. You know, I didn't know much about HKR, but I thought about going in and doing PE or whatever. So I said, God, after Christmas, I'm going to go back and take some courses. And I did. And, you know, this Christmas passed, I was afraid of weight regain. And so I read this book called The Obesity Code. I started doing, you know, intermittent fasting and being more rigorous at the gym. And, you know, and, you know, doing low carb intermittently. And, you know, I started feeling really great from that. And then I started taking courses, and it occurred to me that I didn't know whether it was PE or another HKR field that I wanted to go into, but that this was where I was supposed to be. And so through all of this, through losing 140 pounds and going from hating myself to kind of liking myself and who I was becoming, you know, I'd shed all these negative things, and I thought I was so useless besides IT and that I could never do anything else. And then I just realized that I had to take a risk, that everything I had been doing was going out of my comfort zone and taking all these risks and breaking these barriers, these self-imposed barriers, these prisons of my own device that I'd been putting myself in my whole life. And so here I am back at MUN, and I want to study recreation now. I want to do something to, I don't know, if I can make anybody, you know, have any of these feelings that I have today, and these, you know, really positive and just exciting feelings when I look back at what I was and then what I am, it makes me happy. And if anybody can ever have that because of words I said or advice I gave or motivation that I was able to provide, then, like, what a great thing to do with your life. I don't care how much it makes. I really don't. Like, Newfoundland is in such a way right now. And, you know, in HKR 2000, when I took it back in the winter, we learned the stats in Newfoundland. 33% of our population is obese. I think that's a really good point to end on, is that I was one of those 33%, and there's a lot of us out there. And society treats us really bad. You know, society treated me pretty nasty, I'll say that. But I started to treat myself better, and that was where it all changed. And, you know, here we are at the end of the hour. I can't believe I just talked for an hour straight, but I did. It was vulnerable, it was emotional, but yeah, follow me on Instagram at Annii Gets Healthy, ANNII Gets Healthy. Thank you so much for tuning in. I just poured my everything out here on the radio, so be it. But I will be back next week with more stuff to talk about, and eventually I'll have some friends on to talk about what they're passionate about. So until then, go on my Instagram at Annii Gets Healthy. See what I'm talking about there. Send me a message if you want to talk to me about something, or if you want me to talk about something here on the show. Until next week, be kind to yourself, folks. I love you all. Have a great week, and have a great night.